Okay, we're recording. Hello everyone. We're episode 27 of the Duke London podcast. I'm continuing my streak of never having repeated an outfit, so we'll see how long that lasts for. We are finding out, we're still in the process of finding out whether this podcast will continue with the lockdown. I don't know what the rules are, whether it counts as work or anything like that. I think this episode will come out, if you're listening when it comes out, it should be, I think, the 14th, so halfway through the month. We may or may not have podcasts to follow, but yeah, I'm not going to do Zoom podcasts. While I can, I prefer the face-to-face thing. I think I've said this a few times. So yeah, I know the Zoom is an option, but I don't really want to go for it. I'd rather take a break and come back to it when I can kind of do the podcast the way I want to do it. So yeah, that's that business taken care of. I'm here with Joe, Carla and Rob from UEL. A wonderful bunch of people who I've had the pleasure of working with a few different times. They run it's Urban Practice. What's the full name?
Dance. So BA Honours, Dance Urban Practice.
Dance Urban Practice course at the University of East London. And I wanted to talk to them because I think it's a very cool program and very interesting. It's, I guess, the only degree program that's working with hip hop dance.
Well, I would say others do work with hip hop dance, but I think we're the one that really prioritises.
Yeah, because it's basically, that's the main drive of the program, right? Yeah. So let's start with a little introduction. Let's go around and tell me your name and a bit about you. And also your kind of, I guess, position on the course in terms of staff-wise, what you do and what the title is, how I should address you. Yeah, let's start with Mr. Robert.
I'm Robert Nicholson. I'm one of the senior lecturers on the Dance Urban Practice programme, and I run the first year Dance Technique Healthier Dancer module. I co-teach with Joe on the first year choreography module, and I also co-teach with a colleague, Dr. Laura Robinson, on the third year placement module.
And you also run the Dance Collective.
And I run the UEL Dance Collective.
Which is how we met.
Yeah.
Yeah, you started that and you got all funding and everything. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. So I'm Carla Trim-Vamben. I am the program leader for the Dance Urban Practice course, and I'm also, so that's my role, and my title is a senior lecturer. So I've been doing the role of a program leader, I think, for more than 4 years. Much more than 4 years.
Yeah, you started it when I started 2015.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, blimey.
Yeah.
So since 2015.
When you say program leader, is that the big boss?
Yeah. No.
No, she's like, no, but yeah.
No, it's just, so program leader is essentially looking after the program, making sure that it runs effectively, making sure that classes are timetabled correctly, all the lovely,
fun admin stuff.
Yeah, mundane, lovely bits. No, and it's also making sure that the team are, supported, making sure that things are running smoothly, basically.
Is there anyone who's above you in the sense of the program wise, or are you top of the program and then it's university after that?
Yeah, so I'll be I'm the program leader. Top of me, I've got a line manager. We've all got the same line manager, who is department head. So of the area, which is performing arts.
Okay, right.
And we're part of an area called music writing and performance.
Right.
And then we're music writing performance is part of a school called Arts and Creative Industries.
Right. So it's all kind of an umbrella underneath an umbrella kind of thing.
Yeah. And then you've got the senior, the top management groups, the dean's groups, and then the vice chancellor groups.
So you're big boss for the UEL for the urban practice course.
Stop saying that. Yeah.
We got to change your title to big boss.
I'm just hearing a boss. Yeah.
But yeah, so above you, the umbrella starts to become across different courses. But for the kind of urban practice, you're top of that umbrella.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm Jo Reed. I'm also senior lecturer on the programme. teaching mainly in the areas of choreography and composition, and also theory into practice.
Okay.
And then my other role is admissions tutor. So I look after kind of like auditions, applications for like students, international students, that kind of thing.
Nice. Okay, cool. Maybe pull the mic down a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So what's you guys sort of background in dance? How did you end up where you are now? Why also did you end up on a, let's say, like a hip hop urban practice kind of course as opposed to like teaching in a different type of school, or how did that come about? Whoever wants to take the floor first.
All right, Robert's pointing at me with his eyes, no fingers, just eyes. So how did I end up here? So I started off dancing so my family is Mauritian. My mum and dad immigrated from Mauritius when they were young. My dad was a DJ, so house parties were everything. Nice. So every weekend, so from Friday through to Sunday, people would come round to eat. And then all of a sudden, my dad would get his decks out and then there'll be food, drink. And so I've been dancing from since young, and seeing that kind of social interaction. And my dad was into many, like he had a very eclectic selection of music. So I was always into Michael Jackson, you know, VHS, old way of like learning choreo. And then one day, so I would learn the Thriller choreo and try and teach all my family, and they'll be bored out of their brain with me. And then I saw Swan Lake, which was really weird. I saw Swan Lake on TV, and I turned and looked at my mum. And I remember this. I used to live in Tottenham in Ferry Lane Estate, if anyone knows. And we had a 1-bedroom flat. And I remember saying to my mum, I really want to go into ballet.
Oh, wow.
And then the week later, she put me into a community ballet school. Yeah. And then from there, that's how I got into dancing, like, you know, formalized dance. Yeah. And then I went into, from there, I did that until I was about in my 20s. And then at the same time, going to school, when they asked where you want to go for college, because we didn't have dance GCSEs at that time, a friend of mine saw that Barnet College was doing a performing arts course. So I went there, and that's when I met a few people with doing, I'm doing air quotes now, street dance. And we went somewhere in Southgate to do a couple of street dance classes. And that's when I was like, oh, we can learn this.
Right.
And from there, went to uni, I started off doing dance studies, but it was really alien to me. I was in a room. I was used to wearing leotard tights and the bun head, but I was used to being in a community that was diverse. Right. And when I went to Middlesex University, I was the only brown face there, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I fit in here. And so I asked to join the performing arts course, because that's kind of, it felt a bit more like open, not friendlier, but just a bit more open to what I could just direct my skills to. Doing that, I met someone called Vicky Ibokwe of Uchenna Dance. And she told me to go to Dance Works and do impact dance class.
With Hakeem, right?
With Hakeem on Ubudo. And I started that every Friday. And that was kind of like the trajectory of going into like teaching, because I left uni, and I, like many students, I was like, what do I do? So for like 3 months, 6 months, it went into a year. I was like, what the hell am I doing with this degree? And he pulled me to one side and he said, I don't know what you're doing. But if you want to, what do you want to do? And I said, I enjoy teaching, because at uni, we did a jazz choreo module. That was like the only module that we had, a jazz choreo module where we learnt, I'm being facetious, but we learned like Britney Spears choreo. And I was able to choreograph my own like piece, and I chose Aaliyah's, one of Aaliyah's tracks, and Vicky was part of that. And that's how we kind of really like engaged with each other, because she saw that I liked that kind of style of moving. And I really enjoyed choreography and teaching. And everyone kept saying, you're really a good teacher. So when Hakeem spoke to me, I was like, right, that's what I want to try and do first instance. And he said, why don't you join a YMCA course? Because back in the day, to be able to get insurance liability, you had to have a studio instructor qualification. Right. So I did the YMCA, so I'm a qualified exercise to music professional. So yeah, I did that, and then through that, I got all my insurance and everything, and Hakeem put me in contact with East London Dance.
Oh, nice.
And back then they did loads of outreach stuff in East London, and I was an assistant for Vicky. Right. In near Black Horse Road. I remember that studio very well. I can't remember what it's called, but I can remember what it looks like. And I went in, and that was like the first paid job that I got for teaching. Right. And community dance practice was my main thing. From East London Dance, going like we're talking about maybe 2005. From that, East London Dance with UEL, they were looking for teachers for the dance urban practice course.
What year did it start?
Oh God, maybe
2007.
Yeah. So I think they were looking for people, but before that, I think there was a moment of just like trialing out bits and pieces.
Yeah. Right, makes sense.
And I think I did an odd class here and there, and then they were looking for someone to do the technique classes. So that must have been like 2007, 2008. And I did maybe like a term, and then they called me back, and they kept on calling me back, and then
and then here you are.
And then I'm here. But I started off as a technique teacher. Then they asked me to do community dance practice, which Robert is now a placement community dance practice module, which Robert teaches on. And they just kept on giving me modules. And I was like, all right.
And then they said, here, take the whole course.
Yeah. But Robert and I taught before he came on as a core teaching member. Robert taught from Newvic.
Yeah, my first teaching job. And I remember being given this timetable. Was it 2007? And they were like, oh, and you're teaching on this new degree program. And I was like, I think I was like 27 at the time or something, going, what? Petrified. Rocking up to Stratford Circus with like 25 people in the studio.
Yeah.
All looking like all in their kit.
Yeah.
And there's me.
I feel like that's a good segue into how you got there.
When I was 5, I started doing Saturday dance classes, because my parents said I had a lot of energy and they needed to divert it.
Yeah.
And I was friends with, I had a couple of friends who went to this dance school at junior school. And so I started doing jazz, modern, and then acrobatics, and then tap, and then ballet. And then I did I kind of, it was a typical dance school, did all the exams, did some of the winter dance festivals at Blackpool, Winter Gardens. Still have the photos with the dodgy outfits. And then when I was there, and then I went to this college. So I grew up in Newark in Nottinghamshire, and I went to Clarendon College when I was 16. And it was really interesting because Clarendon was, it was an FE college, but it was renowned for getting students into conservatoires like Rambert and Studio Centre and Lanes.
Oh, nice.
And I had I had a really inspirational teacher, Caroline Rutzler, and she used to bring, I remember she brought like Brenda Edwards in to do workshops. Who was Brenda Edwards, I think was the first black female ballet dancer for English National Ballet.
Oh wow, nice.
And so we had all these inspirational workshops, and then when I was 18, I auditioned for Lane Theatre Arts and Studio Centre, and I got into both, but I felt more comfortable with Studio Centre. So I went there and I did the training there. So conservatoire style training. It was really, I mean, I don't know what it's like now, but I just remember it being very, very intense. And then whilst I was there, you used to be able to, you had your core core classes, and then you had your options. And I remember choosing, like Carla was saying, the street dance module. And I remember having these classes with Jimmy Williams and Kate Prince.
Oh, wow.
And being completely out of my depth because I was very much a contemporary dancer, classical ballet. But I did love jazz. So I remember when I was younger, I watched Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation. I think I was about 9, and it just blew me away. And so that kind of steered me into the direction of jazz dance. And I remember wanting to choreograph a lot to Janet Jackson when I was younger. And so whilst I was there, we also had at Studio Centre, we had jazz classes with Dolly Henry. And again, that was just a real eye-opener to learning all the styles, like the mathematics isolation technique and the choreography of Bob Fosse, but also learning the other styles of jazz, and the connections between the music and the dance form. When I graduated, I then moved, I auditioned for various companies and organisations, and I did a real mix. I did pantomime. I did a cruise for Royal Caribbean.
Oh, wow.
But I also worked in the community dance sector a lot. So for Green Candle and for Foot in Hand, which was Louise Catarega's company up in Derby at the time. And then I always knew I wanted to go into teaching. So I did the PGCE at the Royal Academy of Dance. And then my first job was at Newham Sixth Form College in 2007. Yeah. And that's how I became introduced to the degree programme when I got the timetable. And at the time, Newham Sixth Form College was a really exciting place because I remember Rachel Bradbear was, she was kind of leading on the enrichment programme, and Kofi Mingo was teaching all of the a lot of the extracurricular classes, so in the various popular and social dance styles and hip hop styles. We had I remember at the time, I think it was 2010, we organised to have a breaking crew for this school's dance competition called True School, and Kofi trained them up.
Oh, nice.
And they came second. And also at the time of when I was teaching at Newham Sixth Form, there are professionals now in the industry like Joseph Tunga and Ricardo da Silva, who were doing their A-levels at the time. So it's interesting to see their journey. And also then I moved on to Lewisham College in 2012. So I became a course leader of dance there. And that was an interesting process because that was very much a bit like my training at Clarendon College, in that it was very practice-based. And they had, in a way, they had a mini conservatoire dance timetable. So they do their Graham technique, their Cunningham technique, their release technique, their ballet, their jazz, mathematics. And then they'd all go off and audition. And some people actually just went into the profession, which I thought was interesting.
I remember hearing a lot of talk about Lewisham College when I first started.
Yeah. And there are people now, I see them on Instagram and everything, who I taught, and they're just, they're just doing pop videos and tours and
nice.
So it's interesting seeing that they've gone through a college education, skipped conservatoire training or university, and they've just pursued a career.
Yeah.
Robert's got a lot of footage of certain really amazing dancers in their ballet classes.
Really?
Like Lewisham College.
I won't disclose them.
Holding on to the blackmail files.
And then in 2014, I moved to University of Lincoln to become a lecturer on the dance degree there. And then I realised that I loved London too much. And
Yeah,
then
London.
Gave you a call.
I gave Carla a call and I was like, there's not much diversity here.
Can I come back?
Can I come? And then there was a job. I remember there was a job post at UEL. And like Carla said, I taught there previously when I first started at Newham Sixth Form, and there was the collaboration with UEL. And then I got the job as a senior lecturer at UEL in 2015.
Amazing.
Mm.
Nice.
That's my story.
Nice.
I like it. Let's go, Joe.
So for me, I grew up in a really small town in Essex where there wasn't loads of dance.
Which town?
Brentwood.
Oh.
Yeah, the Towie place. So yeah, and I went to a dance school and did like ballet, a lot of tap, and I always gravitated towards tap. I'd say more than any of the other styles. And then as part of that, we did like some jazz, which I say jazz, and got really absolutely obsessed with Michael Jackson, like through my teenage years. And I used to travel up to Pineapple from about the age of like 13, 14 to do a Michael Jackson jazz dance class at Pineapple with a guy called Anthony King. And he used to basically teach you like routines. And I thought it was like the best thing ever. I absolutely loved it. And then I got really interested in contemporary dance through doing GCSE dance and A-level dance at my school, because it had like a performing arts status. So I had like a big dance studio and stuff, which is wicked. And then found out about the dance and culture degree that was at University of Surrey at the time, which was like the longest running dance degree program at the time. It started like, I don't know if it was the 80s or but it doesn't exist anymore, sadly, but it ran for a long time. And as part of that, got to do styles like Katak. I learned for just a year, but quite intensively, and that was really amazing. And also what was called vertical dance, because I had a teacher that specialised in, you basically were harnessed up and dangling on a wall, so you learnt like kind of if you imagine that you sort of were sideways on the wall, you'd learn to do all these kind of dance choreography things.
I've seen a few theatre shows that have incorporated stuff like that.
And I absolutely loved that as well. And as part of the degree, it was kind of extracurricular, but I met a woman called Vicky Steege, who ran a company called T21 Dance, and she taught me some stuff that was kind of popping predominantly based. Then she was like, you've got to come and do this course with me. I'm going to do this course. I was like, okay, I got getting really, really hooked. And it turned out to be Skills and Drills. That was led by Robert Hilton at Greenwich Dance. And through that, I was introduced to people like Clara, Fred, Kenrick, Bly. So then started to go to more classes kind of in those things. And then through the degree, I was getting more and more interested in popular dance. Like anything to do with kind of social dance and popular dance. I was like, dance is way broader than, and the study of dance can be way broader than kind of classical kind of styles. And then by the time I did my dissertation, I was getting really into this idea of how to connect like critical thinking or theoretical stuff to practice. Someone said to me like, a few times like, have you thought about doing like a master's? I was like, what's that? I had no idea. But ended up doing a master's degree to sort of like further develop skills in that. And then I was working like quite a lot in the community, doing different education dance projects, community dance, like Key Stage 1, like little ones, and ranging right up to adults and just different community projects. And then I think I started to think about a PhD, just because I was so obsessed with studying and relating it to practice, and all the while training as well as a dancer. And I did some work. Another great thing was Woking Dance. I think they're called Woking Dance now. Used to be called Woking Dance Festival, and I was made like an emerging associate artist with them. And as part of that, I was allowed to have a mentor, and I had Robert Hilton as my mentor for like, it was about 2.5 years, I think. And it was the best thing ever. Like I learned so much, and I was supported to make like choreographic pieces and for different kind of projects and tours and stuff. And then from there, through the PhD, I was presenting at conferences, but I was trying to do some stuff that was like a bit more performative as well as like reading a paper, and then got invited to do a guest lecture at Kingston University. And I'd done a little bit of teaching back at Surrey as well, and then really got into that. And it was a similar thing to how Carla said, like where they'd give you a module and you'd do it and it would go really well, and they'd say, oh, can you come and teach this and this? And I did more and more teaching, and then fast forward to 2014, and I saw the post at UEL. And a few people said to me, oh, you should go for this. And I was like, what? I can't go for this. I'm just a freelance artist, But
I also called you a couple of years before that to come to a module.
I forgot to say that. Yeah, I got invited to do a guest module, but I think I couldn't do it because it was clashed. Like the last, right. Yeah. So yeah, I forgot about that, And yeah, because everyone used to say to me, have you met Carla? Have you met Carla? And I'd be like, no. And be like, you need to meet Carla. You and Carla. And I was like, who's this Carla? Like, it's so funny. And now we're friends. But yeah, so then alongside that, I've always tried to just keep my dancing going. Yeah. So I did quite a lot of like theatre stuff, quite a lot of projects with Boy Blue, which was like a really great experience. And then I got quite sick and had to have a surgery, and I kind of had to take some time out. And then when I got back into dance, I've got really into light feet. Yeah. I've been training ever since, and I'm thanks to Kieran and various people, and now dance that as part of KFAM. And then and just developed. I think I've been at UEL now for 6 years. Yeah.
I think that's really cool as well about the light feet. I was going to say that like it's cool to see teachers learning. You know what I mean? So it's really nice for me to see you in a place where it's not a case of you found your career, let's say, already. You've got some stability within your practice, and you're like, I'm a teacher, this is kind of my career, this is what I'm doing, but you're still stepping out of your comfort zone to go, well, I'm going to learn light feet now, which is like, I think a great example for the students, because it's like, it's easy for teachers to sit back and be like, oh yeah, I'm a teacher, I've done all my training, it's your turn now, I'm just going to give you my knowledge. And you're just like, a lot of times dancing with your students, like, all right, well, if you're going to learn, I'm going to come and learn light feet too. And it's like, they see you doing the same struggle as them, which is, and then also I feel like they see you in that position of like learning the same knowledge and struggling alongside them. So then when you do turn around and say, here's something I learned in my history, take this, it's easier to be like, oh yeah, cool, I respect her and I can take this advice or knowledge or whatever. I feel like, anyway. Yeah. That's how I feel like about my teachers. Like I prefer that than the alternative.
I kind of see them as quite separate as well, like who I am when I'm training life. It's nothing to do with what, like, of course it's got everything to do with UEL because it's another kind of popular dance form, and it expands my knowledge, of course, but I'm not going to teach light feet. Like, this is not remotely, and just absolutely love training in it and learning.
Yeah, but also it's like you could probably bring something new to that scenario, because even if you're learning a style brand new alongside someone else who's learning a style brand new, you have learned how to learn before. You know what I mean? So you have experience learning. So you might be able to say, oh, it's going to stick in your brain better if you do this. So, so you're in that way, you're still bringing something to the table with the light feet thing, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I think with teaching, with lecturing, that's the I think it's a really like an old fashioned kind of thinking that we're the font of all knowledge. It's a very kind of archaic kind of thinking.
Like
in
the
that
teacher
way.
must never be questioned and must know all the answers to everything.
Exactly, but to be the ultimate person that's forever evolving, you're learning.
It also feels like quite a lot of the time like it's showing students that actually there isn't one answer, and you have to ask the question,
especially in the arts. It is so important. And I think also for me it's the idea of my favorite type of teacher is like not so much yes, at times like a giver of knowledge, but also like a facilitator of learning. So it's like being someone who can say, I don't know, but I know 7 people who can tell you better than me is valuable, very valuable, because it's like they might not have got that knowledge if it wasn't for you. Like with Keelan, like when we were doing the collective, she was like, oh, I really want to learn light feet. And for me, I was like, right, I know nothing about light feet, cool. And I like in the old, what you're saying, like the old fashioned way, I could say, well, I can't teach you that. But I just said, here's Kieran's number, call him and he'll do it. But it's like in my way, I'm like, that's valuable because I was the link between them. So it's like,
Yeah.
even if it's Kieran like teaching her, like I facilitated her meeting her. And I think stuff like that for me is just as important to be able to do for people, is like give them the avenues and stuff, and just say, I don't know, but here's someone that does.
Yeah.
Um,
It's relinquishing ego.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that thing of guidance, because we've all shared, and you probably shared that moment where you see someone going somewhere and you know what they can do.
Yep.
But you have to step back and not intervene to allow them to find the pathway themselves and do it themselves. So there are many frustrating moments when you're like, just do it this way. Like, but that's not the way that they're going to learn.
Yeah. I think it's definitely like that. Like you can see people's path. I always think you can see people's, especially if you know the scene and you know the industry, it's like, you know who people are going to be attracted to. Sometimes before they are, you're like, oh, you're going to hang out with these people and do this type of dance and do this. You just don't know it yet. But also I think it's any advice. Like I have a really good friend from Switzerland, and she told me one time, and it's like always stuck with me. She said it really offhand, but she was like, when people give you advice, they give you advice on how they want to see you dance, not how you should dance, or like how you might want to dance. And I think that's really important, where it's like, especially when we bring that into teaching, it's like, yes, we're going to come at different styles and different types of teaching from our bias, you know, like this is how I think hip hop should be done, or this is my version of hip hop or whatever. So I'm going to teach it this way. But it's also important to know what the student wants to learn. Because like my friend Lee, like whenever he's judging or whatever, if someone comes up and said, oh, have you got any advice about my popping? He's like, the first thing he asked, which I thought was genius, is like, he said, well, what are you working on? What do you want to get better at? Because it's all good him saying, oh, you need to get better at this, get better at this, get better at this. But it's like, what if that's not the avenue they want to go down, you know? And I think that's like a really important thing that we miss a lot as teachers, is like understanding that it's not you don't have the, like what you just said, like you don't have the answers to like where the person should go. It's like you have to guide them based on where they want to go, I guess.
Totally. I remember in 2010, I took a trip with my girls to New York. We went to do like a 2-week stint where we took classes, and I remember taking class of Ejo Wilson, because that's kind of like the club dances are really where I'm like focused on and comfortable, and like researching those areas as well, and taking his class, and just really what stuck with me that he didn't do much. He spoke and he said, I don't want you to dance like me. And Clara Bajado is similar to that.
Tally's like that as well.
So it's just like, okay, well then you have to do the work. You really have to do the work to look inside and like, what is it? How am I feeling in this moment? And all that kind of intention of behind the movement and finding your own movement vocabulary, which we try to do on the program as well, is getting students to understand that they have a lot more power than what they think they do.
It's also like ways of seeing the world as well. Like I remembered when I did my master's, my mind was just blown because you're just like, oh my gosh, I will never look at this the same ever again, like the way you see things. And even with the first years last week when we were having, you know, those conversations about that reading, they're like, because it was like a reading that was looking at what is technique, actually what is it if you break it down, and they were like, it was so deep, like mind blowing. But it's so great to see that, and you see them start to question like their own experiences. And
if you can sum it up, what was the answer? What is technique?
Well, I think that's the point, right? So it's leading to like just more questions.
Right.
Actually, when you pin it down, they couldn't answer it definitively because it means differently. But it was kind of challenging this idea that technical styles are certain styles and other styles, you know,
less
that kind
technical.
of So
Interesting.
because actually that happens a lot. We get students who come in and they say, oh, but I've done my technical styles, but I also love hip hop. And we're like, now that's interesting.
Less
you know,
What styles are those?
and it's, you know, it's just that's just what the way they've learnt it. So obviously,
but is there something in the fact that these other styles, which they're probably referring to, like ballet and contemporary and stuff, are older and therefore more established in what the consensus is on what the technique should be in those styles? Whereas in hip hop, because we're a lot newer, and a lot of these hip hop styles, there's a massive diversity in opinion on what is the right way to go about things. And still, even on the other end, like in the teaching end, there's a massive, like I just said, I forgot my own word that I just said, diversity in opinion. But then on the kind of recipient end, like in judging and in shows and stuff like that, there's not really one, there's a lot of different types of dancer that we would look at and go, that's a good dancer. Does that make sense? Whereas I feel like in ballet and contemporary, for the better or for the worse, there's less of a variety in what we accept as a good ballet dancer, for example. It's like audiences or choreographers or auditions. It's like, well, whatever audition you go into, pretty much it's like this constitutes a good ballet dancer. Whereas in hip hop, that's a wide spectrum of what you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
do you think there's something in that, or?
No, potentially, definitely. But I think, sometimes the way that dances are valued is also coming into that. And that's what we're kind of, I suppose, aiming to challenge through the program in the first place. Yeah,
because I think for me, it's often like, I've had so many like debates and stuff about like judging and stuff like that. But, like say, for example, if it's not alien to hear a judge be like, oh, that person won because they had more heart. And it's like, or because they were enjoying it more or so. And it's like, you would never hear that but it's like, yeah, they had more heart, but their technique sucked. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, there's a lot more strict rules based on, which I think is not something I want to get into with hip hop, because I think it's nice, the variety. But then I guess it does lend itself to it being seen as less strict or less
sure. Yeah.
I suppose also because of the improvisational element of it all. So it's subjective in that sense, isn't it? And I mean, our judgment is always subjective, and I suppose the codification allows the objectiveness of it. But I would say ballet and those styles could arguably be said as older, but the value systems of storytelling, of the embodiment of certain elements within hip hop, outdate all of that.
True.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. I think, what was I going to say? Like, it's interesting also the what we value as like the technique in let's say ballet or something, it tends to like outweigh all these elements in hip hop. That we have a lot of other elements in hip hop that make it a difficult dance, even like understanding the knowledge and the context of moves, which you might not have to do in ballet. Like you might not have to understand the context of why you're doing this move and how it fits with the next move. It's just moves that fit together or don't.
I would suppose though, someone, because having this conversation with a ballet professional in the room, they could argue that there's that element of technique is just the foundation of them trying to understand their bodies moving in space.
Yeah.
So when they're putting together, so I'm thinking of, I've forgotten his, like, is it Forsyth? Or something?
Oh yeah, William Forsyth.
Yeah, I remember reading about him at uni, and just the way that he would, a flick of a hand would be telling the story, and so that in that sense, there's that element of heart and intention that the conversation could then be brought in that realm as well. It's
also very aware that I'm coming from a place, like I'm sitting with three people that have like high level degrees in dance. I'm just saying.
I'm just being devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Like,
no, it's
in
good.
the way that you're in a room. I've been in a room with Ballet Black.
Yeah,
and just the way that they use their technique. It isn't just for them. It's not just putting step to step.
Yeah.
And it is about that feeling. So there are a lot of commonalities that I think that sometimes we assume are not there.
Yeah, 100%. And vice versa. I've seen a lot of hip hop dancers just linking steps. And it's like, I've said this so many times, but like being knowledgeable doesn't equal being good. Like, so I think there's what a lot of hip hop dancers will assume about ballet. What you're saying is like, oh, they're just doing moves and there's not any of this like feeling and understanding, when there is.
Yeah,
clearly, and if you've been to see like any classical performances, like there's a lot of it's really beautiful for a reason. And then in hip hop, as much as we think, oh, we're all about feeling and heart, and it's like there's a big proportion of dancers that are just linking shit together with no. And I'm not just talking about like dancers that are out of touch, like dancers that are in touch and part of the scene and stuff, and are just linking step, and it's like you're just showing off all the different steps that you've learned. You're not dancing and not understanding and showing your aspect. So I think it works both ways.
Yeah, and I think it's always going to be like, we have to acknowledge putting some of these dance styles in an education institution context is problematic. Like,
interesting.
It's always going to have issues because of the setting, you know, the formal setting, like, and I think that's one of the first things that we kind of make the students aware of. And I think they come in and we sort of say, you know, this is a problem. Like, we're trying to talk to you about, you know, the essence of a club or the essence of a social dance or whatever in a studio, in a university. And we have to question that as well.
Yeah. But I think also it's a bit of a tough paradox, I guess is the right word, where I've heard a lot of like hip hop professionals, especially ones that are working in theatre and wanting to do more long form work, complain about the institutions are very geared towards ballet and contemporary and these sort of styles. And it's a struggle for hip hop to push through and be able to be seen on the same level. But at the same time, as soon as we start to institutionalize hip hop, it becomes like the argument of like, oh, it shouldn't be there. It's like, but okay, then you don't get both. Like, if we're not going to institutionalize hip hop and we're going to keep it from the streets, we can't get the big money. Like, we can't be put on the big stages because we don't have the
But it's the idea of changing how we think and feel about leadership. Are we going to continually strive to be leaders within a system that doesn't work or want us? Or are we going to change the way that system is? And I think that's where we're like, a lot of people are thinking like the system doesn't work and it pits us against each other. So when we have these conversations, is either ballet or contemporary or hip hop rather than, so it's always going to be them or us. Yeah. So I think that like the idea of where what rooms we sit in and how we create those spaces, whether they're rooms or not, like I think that's where I think our energy should kind of go into and thinking. And I mean, that's contradictory with me being in a position of a program leader, but at the same time, it's exciting to talk like that because the value systems do need to shift. Yeah. And if that means, so there's always, you know, within our realm, oh, there's a new program and is it stepping on our toes or what? Like, right. Don't care. Yeah. Like, really don't care. I mean, yeah, it affects student numbers, but at the same time, that means that we're making steps and strives
on
forward.
A wider scale.
Yeah, and that's really more important than anything else, in the sense of trying to figure out how we are going to make it more inclusive. And within that inclusivity then brings a level of uncomfortableness, definitely, for like the systems, the commercial, you know, the capitalized systems that we live in. So it's, I think... I think the type of thinking and the way that we think about how we raise value systems within, you know, dance has to shift, that we're not striving for these indoctrined kind of formats and think of other ways of opening up the scope so that hip hop, other styles we can be on the same common ground. Yeah.
Interesting. So how do you see kind of where the students are aimed at through UEL? Like, so when you're training a student, they do the 3 years and then they leave, like that's you kind of pulling the bow back on the arrow. When you let go of them, what trajectory do you kind of see your students on? Is there a particular one, or do you try and keep it as wide as possible? Like, do you think, oh, they're definitely going to be able to do this, but we don't kind of train them for this as much? Or is there...
I think it's probably like many things. So the idea of what we sort of call it a portfolio career. Right. So the idea that you would likely, if you seriously want to make your money out of dance, the likelihood is you're going to have to do a lot of different things within the industry, and that might even involve additional skills as well that you use in connection with dance, whether that be dance and film, dance and photography, dance and music, all these different skills that, you know, blend really nicely with dance.
I think that's the arts industry in general, isn't it? Like, I think it was Ivan that was saying on the pod, like, about everyone kind of needs to be multidisciplinary these days to survive. And I think that's really true. Even if you specialize in one thing, it's like, but how can you collaborate with other people? And the arts
Yeah.
is all about collaboration anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, and people are jumping on the bandwagon now, like the government, even the way that they're you know, let's train our little robots to be able to do loads of things, to you know, engineer something so that they can make money. They're realizing that the arts industry is massive.
Yeah, right.
And it's what's the word? It continuously, you know, makes out of adversity makes fabulous things.
Yeah.
So even though they're, you know, stifling the arts, they undoubtedly are learning from us constantly. So that's why it's so frustrating where all the funding cuts happen, because you're like, hello, hang on a second.
Yeah.
You know, you're not thinking of these things without other things being an influence, and the arts are a great influence on that type of thinking. But yeah, I mean, a lot of our students are this is the first degree.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately when we're looking at them, and Robert can talk about like when he's teaching placement, it's trying to get them to understand the skills and the strength that they already have, that they need to use to empower themselves to feel like they have a standing point, because obviously they're going into something that is devalued in society. So we're having to empower them to feel positive about what they can do, first and foremost, but giving them an idea of the different avenues that they can go down and giving them a taste. So giving them a taste of the things that they can actually do, and not being like a conservatoire, being able to train them directly through single route pathways, and just hopefully something sticks. And with the knowledge that maybe 3 or 5 years down the line they'll be like, oh, that's what they were talking about.
I think also that notion of oh, if I want to become a performer, then I need to go to a conservatoire. I think that's changed. That's changed, and knowing, like, you know, quite a few of our students have gone into performance areas of performance in the West End or with different companies. I think that idea of, oh, if I go to university I can't perform with a major company or choreographer, etc. I think at UEL especially, I think that's knocked on its head.
I remember going to Kingston. I auditioned at Kingston, and when I just left college, I auditioned at Kingston, and they straight out told us halfway through the audition, like, oh, if you want to be a professional dancer, this isn't the course for you. And I was like, wait, what? And they were like, this is like, if you want to maybe go into teach, like, you're not going to get enough knowledge from this course to work as a professional. And I was like, why am I here then? But I think, it's like, that was maybe the impression I got when I was auditioning, which was 2008 or so, was like, university was not for professionals. And then the like kind of, I guess, conservatoire training was for professionals.
I think it's a real
I think the only difference was Laban.
Right.
I think Laban was what people suggested to me, because they were like, oh, that one is like one of the only ones you get a degree and you can get good training from. And it's like, I was like, oh, okay, cool.
I think it's a mixture now, though. I think, you know, there are definitely people that graduate who become professional dancers almost full time from our program. But at the same time, there are people that come onto the program they don't want to be a performer. They actually have other skills. So, and, you know, and they still have good performance skills. I'm thinking of Tia Parson. She's got great dance skills, but she's really nervous as a dancer. I'm sure she won't mind me saying. And now she's aced her way through 3 different dance organisations, just got promoted at Rombert, and her skills in that area is something that perhaps she might not have discovered without knowing that part of the industry. So I think we're very kind of, it's really, when we're looking for applicants and students, it's a curiosity and an open-mindedness to want to discover lots of things. And I think the moral is, you just don't know where that can take you. Like, if someone told me when I was that age that I'd be doing this kind of job, I would have just laughed like completely. So
it's intention of that person as well. So to say that you can't do something through that, I mean, if you really wanted to become a dancer, you would have been one, right? So and it's supporting. So someone comes through our doors and says and sits down and has a tutorial with us. What do you want to do? Right, you want to be a dancer. Right, these are the goals. Let's figure it out. This is what you can get from the course. This is what you can't get from the course, and let's figure that out and not shut the door on them like before they've even started.
And I guess also it's going back to the thing of like being facilitators of knowledge, where it's like, if you're real about what you can't get from the course, it's not a case of like, well, don't come here. It's like, come here learn this stuff from the course and then add on to it with all this
Yeah.
other knowledge, and we can maybe connect you with people. And,
Yeah.
and I think that's one good thing about UEL as well. You guys have a lot of different actual connections within the industry that people will get introduced. It's not like a little
Yeah.
bubble where they go and they come back and then they're like, all right, so where do I start? It's like by the time you finish, I feel like I've never been to UEL, but like by the time you finish, I feel like you'll know enough connections. You'll start to know who is like Clara, who's Fred, like all these different people that are part of
Yeah.
the scene.
Yeah.
That's one thing, is like the industry links and knowing, like you're saying, who,
Yeah.
because networking for me, and I don't know for everyone else around the table, but that's something that really, and still kind of, it's like, oh what am I doing? Networking. And it's only recently I'm like, well, having a conversation with Robert, like one-to-one, is still networking.
Yeah,
if
yeah.
we're talking about,
Definitely.
and just understanding the different types of networking, but being able to have industry professionals and even the students engaging with us and understanding what we do and
Yeah.
how we do it, and the people that we know, bringing them through the doors makes it less scary when they're leaving.
Yeah, yeah.
And they have
Yeah.
those, and if they're wanting to make a connection within the environment that we create, hopefully feels a little safer than just going out
Yeah, yeah.
and trying to
It's
blind.
it's like
yeah.
one level of like because you could just talk to someone randomly in the industry and you don't know if they're a horrible person. You don't know what their like kind of reputation is. It's like a little vetting by you guys of like, oh, this person came through our doors, so at least us three like trust them. You know what I mean? So like they're a good guy or a good girl. That's why they're here. So if you want to talk to them, like it's probably a little bit safer than just doing it at an event or something in that way.
Yeah, and just really empowering them to go, well, just have a conversation.
Yeah.
Or let's orchestrate something, right, let's have a meeting. So you just, so the first instance of like meeting and speaking to someone isn't as scary.
Yeah, yeah,
And
definitely.
it's all about training and guidance. Because I mean, I never knew how to do loads of things. I'm the first one in my like out of my mum and dad to go to university and in the arts.
Yeah.
Like everyone else did like the other, regular jobs and stuff like that, but in the arts. And it was quite daunting. And if I didn't have someone like Hakeem or Vicky or these people to guide, these are the types of leaderships skills that a lot of people don't talk about.
Yeah.
And it's more personable kind of way of guidance, which I think is really needed.
Yeah, and I think that the human element and the kind of networking is such an important thing, but also such a misunderstood thing. And like, I think I've spoken about this before, but like I've heard so many people using networking wrong and it being like, oh, I have to pretend to like someone and to try and get in their friendship circle. And that's the kind of some people's like feeling of what networking is. So even when they decide not to do it, they're like, oh, I'm not going to network because I don't want to pretend to be friends with people that I'm not. And it's like, that's really not what networking is in its essence. Like just having a real conversation with someone, or for me, like my motto at the moment is like, just be there. Like, like no matter where there is like, just be there. Like, and then things tend to like, I again, I think I spoke about this, but like me just leaving the house as opposed to staying in tends to bring me more opportunities. Like even by people that know me, I'm like, we talk all the time, but then I see them in real life and they want to book me in for a photo shoot. And I'm like, what? You didn't like, why is it just because you saw me in real life? But sometimes it is that connection.
Yeah.
It makes you want to work with the person, even just being around them and stuff. And I think just having conversations with no agenda, where it's like, which I guess if you have the space to have that in UEL is great, where it's like, even say with Keelan, like for anyone that's listening that doesn't know, there's I went in to teach for the collective at UEL, which was kind of like do you call it like extracurricular activity for them?
Yeah, so it was set up in 2015 as a undergrad performance company, because I remember we were getting a lot of requests to perform at external events, etc. And it was just a really good way of getting external practitioners, artists in to come and choreograph on the students. So done through an audition process, and two, it was just an external platform in order for, because there is a push on marketing yourself, and it was a push to get the collective on these external platforms and show everyone outside kind of a taste of what we do on the program.
Yeah. And I think so I went in to teach, I think it was a couple of years ago maybe.
2018. 18.
Yeah. Oh, wow, that went quick.
Yeah.
But just even in the thing of networking, like the conversations I had with some of them ended up with me, like Keelan's a great example, where it wasn't like she came to me and she was like, oh, I need something from you. It was just talking, and she's like, oh, I would love to do like she actually said like, oh, it would be like a dream to learn light feet from Kieran. And I was like, well, I can make that happen. Like, that's super easy. Like, for me, I'm like, Kieran's not like, not to insult him, but like, he's not a big deal. He's just Kieran. Do you know what I mean? He's just my friend. And like, so when she said that, I was like, oh, well, but if she had come and I had sensed like some agenda of like, oh, I'm going to get close to Luke so that he can like, like that would have been weird. And you would have been like, oh, I don't get
See
it.
through that.
Yeah. So just having a safe conversation where she could just tell me what she was feeling, even not expecting me to do anything, resulted in her being able to train with Kieran. So I think that's the thing with networking is like, it's not a do something with an expectation. It's just like be yourself with as many people as you can and go out and talk to people when you're not locked down. And things will come from that naturally, you know. It's just the way the world works is like you meet and you identify with people that have similar interests or know people that have similar interests. And if they're good people, they'll kind of put you in contact. You know, there's all sorts of stuff that can come from that, I think.
Yeah.
I'm just laughing because there's definitely been times when we're approached because it's like, oh, can I have some space? Can you get me a job? And it's like, I can't actually do those things. I think sometimes people think we've got this like power that we can just, but it's tricky.
Sitting in an organisation, an institution with the different layers that we kind of identified at the start, it's really, so even with the dance collective that Robert started, it's through funding, a funding pot, having to find that and having to apply for it every year. Because even though we get students through the door, it doesn't really, it kind of just pays for the building basically.
Right.
So it's education is hit, and universities, you know, it's been hit with students having to pay their fees. That's a major sign that things have changed. So it's quite hard because we do want to support the community as much as we can. It's just finding ways that is like a proper exchange.
And that's the best, like when we've had those conversations with different individuals like yourself and others, like we've had some great projects that have come out of that for sure.
Yeah, and I think also it's like sometimes nothing comes out of it, but it doesn't mean that you didn't gain anything, if that makes sense. Like me and you sat down actually about, I was just interested in the program. I just wrote you and I was like, I'm really interested in the UEL program. Can we talk about it? And I just came to your office and we just sat for like an hour and you just told me about the program and how you did it. And like, I wasn't expecting anything. And it was just a nice chat. And I was like, oh, cool. Now I know more stuff about it. And it's like, that's fine. But it's like just leaving the house. Like, you never know. You might gain some knowledge. You might gain a new friend. You might gain an opportunity. You know, it might be that you were like, oh, you know, you were interested in that thing. Like, let me give you this opportunity. Or you might have just been like, oh, hey, you want to go for a coffee sometime? That was a nice chat. You know, you never know what you're going to get out of any given situation. But it's like this, you only regret the things you don't do kind of thing. Like staying in the house doesn't get you anything, but leaving the house might get you something, even if it's 20% chance, you know, or, you know, meeting people or kind of taking the initiative to make a first step, I think.
Totally.
What was I going to say? How do you guys kind of balance, like, how do I phrase that? I guess what we were talking about earlier, like the teaching in a I guess institutionalized way with the kind of nature of the hip hop dances, which are not that. Like, do you guys take any specific approaches, or like, is there anything that you try to keep in mind, or where do you get your structure in a way from? Like, how does that happen? How do you change something from that and fit it into this type of format?
Well, for me, I ultimately is identifying there's a hybrid going on of that institutionalized space and getting the students to be aware of it, and that, you know,
that's a really good thing.
So because if you try and do it and just like, oh yeah, just imagine you're in the club, like just imagine this, that, you know, it's so hard. You've got daylight streaming in. The first thing is like with like club dances, I'm just like, well, we're doing it at the wrong time of day. First and foremost, ideally, and just highlighting it. And just going, ideally, this would be, I'd prefer it if we were in a club. If we were in a blacked out room, had a DJ. And it's really great in the last, I think, 5 more years of seeing DJs and coming into classes at external classes and being able to reference certain people.
Yeah.
like, you know, and showing videos. Like, it's really great that people are streaming stuff now and you can show snippets within a class. So we've got, like, you know, the digital aspect that you bring in to show clips and examples to highlight the differences within the institution, also within our own research, our practice-based research. So I did a dissertation talking about improvisation and the different ways that we look on it, like so observing students when I say to them, now let's freestyle, and they're seizing up within this institutionalized space, and then realizing if I say improvise, they feel a little bit less
interesting,
you know, scared, and identifying, you know, through researching that, you know, there are differences between the contemporary idea of freestyle and the, you know, the popular social dances of what improvisation is. I use those terms wrong. Contemporary improvisation style, and then social dance, popular dance improvisation, and knowing the differences and getting them to play around with it, because when they play around with it, they start to realize. So the theory being embodied rather than just separated, that like dichotomy of the brain and the mind is really detrimental within our field. And it's like really coming back to the body, the brain, the mind, that, you know, learning through doing, learning through feeling, that really gets them to make connections and realize that we may be talking about popping one day, we may be talking about house, another contemporary release, but there are similarities, commonalities through the whole thing. And what does this, like a room like this, how does it impact us when we're learning? And and just, I think, really pulling and teasing these things out and getting them to make the connection themselves, and also guiding them. I think guidance is a tag word for me today. but yeah, I think that for me, that's the main kind of focus of bringing it out, and using myself as an example as well.
You know, I always struggled with when kind of learning these things was like, we talk a lot about the competition scene kind of in a way being too big, or it kind of eclipsing a lot of the elements that these dances started from, like the clubs and the parties and the jams and stuff like that. But at the same time, I do think that competition and performance enhance progress, because this is what I always struggled with. If I'm learning a thing and they're like, oh, well, the ultimate thing, the ultimate end goal is for you to dance this in a club with your friends. And I'm like, well, then why do I need to be good at it? I don't need to be good at it to dance in a club with my friends. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you might want to learn loads of different stuff, but again, you kind of do that as you dance in a club. You learn from someone, you copy that step, you do this. So that whole experience is almost like, for me, quite self-contained in the sense that I'm doing all my learning and all my performance at parties in that, like, you know, when we used to go to like Madame Jojo's and stuff, it's like, I was like, you know, just picking up house steps from someone. I never wanted to dance house. I never would enter a battle with it. I never thought I was knowledgeable. But in that sense, I'm in a house club, like there's house music playing. My friends are doing steps. I'm going to try and copy a step. I'm going to like dance it a little bit. I'm going to show them. There's a step I picked up from someone else that they're going to know. And it's like, okay, if this is the end goal, I don't need to do any more training. So I think that's the thing where when we kind of go into like hardcore training, it's like, I personally feel like I need there to be a competition or a show, or even in performance, there's auditions and stuff. I need there to be some sort of stakes for me to have the drive to be better at it, I guess.
Yeah, and I also think it's to do with the students finding themselves as movers, as well as within the styles. So obviously in technique, they're learning particular techniques that are set each year or each term. But then when it comes to like the area of like choreography and composition, then it's like, okay, but how do you move? And that's a culmination of everything you've done and other things about your body, your personality, your identity. And how do we encourage the students to explore that without putting our agenda of what we'd like them to create? So that's why, like, when it comes to like the final project module where they make their final piece, which you've come into, I'm always so happy when I sit back and they've all made something very different. Like you start to see the themness in their work. So I think that's really important as well, that they discover their identity as a mover.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important. And like, is maybe not focused on as much, because you see a lot of like, in general, like, oh, okay, I'm going to do a piece of choreography that's lock-in, and it's like to the same James Brown song, and it's the same like moves, and it's like, oh, it's a happy upbeat piece and we're all going to wear colorful clothing, and it's like, okay, yeah, we get it, like, fine. And I think there's this thing where, because we want to stick so much on the history and the like have respect to the original kind of style, it stifles us being creative. Like, I think a lot like of what Kieran tells me about the Light Feet guys in New York, where it's like, here you get, if you picture Light Feet, it's like one type of style. And disclaimer, I'm talking with no base of knowledge, I'm just talking, so don't come for me if I'm wrong. But like that here in Europe, it's very like, this is what Light Feet looks like, and it's one kind of style of movement. Whereas I think from what Kieran was telling me, a lot of the guys in New York, everybody looks completely different, and they all have their own like really identifiable thing. But you're able to do that when you're in the place where the style is being created, and you're not restricted by having to pay respect to anything previous in a way. So like the Light Feet guys in New York are Light Feet, so whatever they do is valid, you know what I mean? Whereas when it's translated over to here, we have a bit of a worry, I guess, of like, oh, but I don't want to do it too different, because then it's not. Whereas in there, they're like, I want to do it too different so that I'm me. And I think this restricts us with a lot of these styles, even like hip hop, pop in, lock in and stuff, where it's like, we aren't. Whereas, you know, like Don Campbell, I guess the whole story about him like doing the dance wrong and accidentally creating lock in. No one wants to do that, because they're like, oh no, but I have to pay respect to I can't do it wrong and be proud of that, you know, because then there's this stigma against not quite doing the pioneers justice in a way. And I think that stifles creativity sometimes, for better or for worse. I don't know what the right answer there is, but And
I think a lot of that is the music choice as well. So like if you're experimenting with abstract genres or soundscapes or you know, then perhaps it doesn't signify a style in the same way that if you put, I don't know, a piece of funk on, there's a certain connotation.
And I guess it's also the question, like, where does a style start and stop? You know, is it only its vocabulary, or is it like a way of moving? Or I think those boundaries are maybe a bit looser in something like contemporary, where in hip hop it's very like, and now you're not doing hip hop, and now you are doing hip hop, and now you're not. Whereas in contemporary, it's like they're standing still in the middle of a room screaming. Yeah, I guess it's contemporary. Like, you know, you see some piece and you're like, okay, cool, this is contemporary just because you said it is, and like no one really is like, whoa, I didn't see any this move or this, you know what I mean?
But they've got, I suppose it's with the word contemporary, they've got the ease of being
anything.
It's
of
new.
the now.
So we see it a lot with our students when we ask them to just go with it, and they do get scared, and they're like, oh, what do you mean? Like, even when setting a piece of writing, just like set it out however you want to, but as long as it has this and that, we're not going to tell you the format. And they're like, what?
I need guidance.
What do you mean?
I guess it's problematic stemming from previous schooling or education, where
there is a right and wrong answer.
And where, you know, the institutions or the government or whoever have set it up where, you know, test, must get it right, can't really necessarily think or have the freedom to think for myself, and then we're asking them to
being taught to like pass an exam kind of thing. Whereas I think at university sometimes, like when students feel vulnerable or uncomfortable, we're like, that's good, that's that's doing a degree, because you're being challenged. You should, if you feel comfy all the time, then you know, perhaps you're not really challenging your thinking.
Going back to what you were saying about, you know, a lot of the styles, we're looking towards America for the reference points. So the idea of what Britishness is, or whatever culture you're coming from, is hard to almost, you know, identify that in someone's dance when their reference point is always America. And I suppose that is a moment that and also like the documentation, the video footage, everything is referring back to that. But it's really important for us to kind of give some value to the British hip hop industry and what we've created, and try to think about what are the differences and what are the things that we're really proud of, and how we are different, but not in a negative way. So I mean, like, doing some work on thinking about what British house culture is, and the music, through the transmission of it from America to England. There was a change in the way that it looked in terms of the people doing it. But we created so many amazing house records and house record labels, and what was going on in the clubs isn't documented. It's through word of mouth. So we can't almost claim a stake in that in a way that Americans do, where it's started, but there is a stake to be claimed. Because the clubs, I mean, unfortunately, it's so heartbreaking that so many clubs are closing. But the club industry and what it produced, and it's just, we've got such a wealth of knowledge that we're not tapping into to be proud of in the dance styles and the way that Britain has created and helped to shape the way that we learn these things here. And France, the different cultures there, and it's just amazing that our reference points continually go to America when they should be broadened out.
I think that's the hard thing, where it's like, if you look at, let's say, like grime with rapping, like, okay, you could say like a lot of the like rap stuff started in the States, or at least the kind of movement that inspired it. But for grime to be created and to be such a different thing, they had to fuse it with different influences. So you got like the bit of house, a bit of like UK garage, a bit of like this sort of stuff that all comes together to make this thing, as well as the American like hip hop aspect, right? And I think the difference there is there was no one being like, you're not doing it like it's supposed to be done. They're like, it doesn't matter, we're doing something different. Like, this is our thing now. We're using you as an influence. But I think it's from a place of good intentions, but we kind of chastise, I guess is the right word, like anyone that doesn't do things how they're supposed to be done, in air quotes, like how they were done in New York in the 80s or whatever, or at least have that as their reference point. Anyone that tries to deviate from that reference point, it's like, no, that you're doing it wrong, you're ruining the dance, you're diluting it, you're doing it. And it's like, in that way, it kind of also holds us back from building something different, or like something. I get if you're not doing hip hop anymore, don't call it hip hop, call it something else, which is fine. Like, they didn't say we're doing rap. They're like, this is grime, we're doing, it's a different thing, and that's fine. But I think there's a difference between, okay, call this the right thing, or don't pretend you're doing something when you're clearly trying to do something else, and just chastising anyone that tries to deviate from the path of America's the reference point, and that's how we do things, and we don't bring in any influences from the UK, because it's like, that's so important, that's what's going to make everything different. And
learning. So if I'm thinking about the way that I learned house, like, there's so many different types of house. So my influence of my parents being Mauritian, hearing music in a certain way, where are my dance, what rhythmic pattern am I like guided to through the way that they listen to music is going to be totally different to someone in New York or Chicago. And the way that I feel it in my body, my parents are constantly dancing with their hips and their backs, and I've got an African diasporic listening from a British lens. It's crazy the way that we don't open up the way that we think about it in that way, and acknowledging that it's come from America, or it's come from somewhere, but there are societal things that have happened. I mean, our colleague Dr. Sarah Lee talks about house in era of apartheid in South Africa, and that's just like crazy the way that how that would have been embodied. Doesn't mean it's not house, it's just house in a different way, in a different format. So it'd be really great to hear these conversations, or these, I remember I was in the book club and dancing, and I could hear two guys just watching, like talking about me while I was dancing. Oh, she's not doing house, she's just doing Afro.
Right.
I'm like, but just come up and dance with me and
Yeah,
let's
yeah,
figure it out. Don't just analyze me and sit down. You're in a club, guys.
Yeah.
Just, just come and dance with me instead. And it would be better if we could just, engage in exchange in that way.
I guess it's also tough because we're in the first 50 years of this thing being literally from nothing. Like, I mean, yes, there's the influences from way back, but in terms of the stars as we know them now, we're something like 50 years, and it's still ever changing. So it's really hard to like pin them down and be like, that's what house is and that's what it will always be. And I think that's what we're trying to do a little bit.
Yeah.
And I guess that's maybe what makes you guys' job hard, is because you have to put a curriculum on something that is in a way pretty fluid still.
Of course, and and it has to change. It has to keep changing. Like, we make changes every single year. But I think some of the things are like showing them moments that were like really influential, whether that's like, in the theatre space, in the battle scene, whatever those moments are. So like, I know one of my favourite things is showing the students Frank DeLuise, Breaking Convention.
Oh yeah, I think I saw that.
Drop It.
What year was that? 2007?
Oh God.
Yeah. I think 2007. I think that's right.
Yeah.
And I saw that live.
Yeah, I think I did as well. Yeah.
My mind. And I mean, when I interviewed about 9 different artists for my PhD, and I think it was literally all but one talked about that piece, like without me prompting.
Yeah.
So like, and showing them that actually at that time, like, understand what this piece was and how like the suits and the way they look like and then you see their minds like, wow. And some of them still, haven't been to Breaking Convention. They might have watched stuff on YouTube, but it's showing them those legacies that we have here in the UK.
Yeah,
as well.
definitely. And things that we've facilitated to happen here. And
I mean, showing little snippets of the jump off, and then showing like the different crews and where they've interlinked, and seeing, Boy Blue and
you. Yeah. We did show the students Carla one year. They were like, oh.
It wasn't me as my twin. But yeah, just seeing how that the scene was then back, what it was like, and then how people have progressed into forming their own companies, and how things have changed, but how things haven't changed as well.
Yeah. True.
Just like movement vocabularies are borrowed, change slightly, or they stay there. I mean, that's why sometimes, I know this might be a contentious subject, but watching some of these talent programs, I'm like, we've seen this 20 years ago. So what are we going to do? And I think that's what the beauty of having people in a room, showing them moments in time and going, we haven't got all the answers. What does it feel for you right now? What can we learn from you? What are you guys thinking right now of society? How can we shift the way that we work, so that we can actually, this idea of innovation not being stifling, but being something that can be really like inspirational in the way that we work. Innovation in terms of the person, rather than just, putting what is something new? What is something new to you? I think that's more relatable.
Yeah, that's kind of almost an impossible question of like, is there any such thing as a new idea in art?
Yeah.
No, like,
yeah. I think there's a saying, there's nothing new under the sun.
I think I was talking about that the other day with someone as well, but like that I know what it was. There's a poll on the Artist for Artists Insta.
Oh yeah.
Did you see it?
Still like an artist.
Still like, and it's like so many people responded. Like you said, would you steal from other people's work, like when creating or something? And so many people were like, no way, like what, never. And it's like, but we all do. Like there's not really is there a possibility to create something brand new? Like how, with all the influences and all the kind of restrictions of just being the same body that everyone else has for the most part, like what, like I just think it's an interesting conversation, like what is new ideas and what is new, like
I guess there's still and there's still though, isn't there?
I guess it depends on the intention behind it, like but I think that's the whole idea of that book, Still Like an Artist, where it's like understanding how to steal like an artist and how to not just copy and take credit for other people, like steal and plagiarize, I guess. But what I was going to ask you guys as well is, how do you feel a pressure to, I guess, keep your finger on the pulse of the stuff that's happening? Because like we were saying, these things are so fluid, and if you're showing like moments in time, do you ever worry like, oh, I haven't seen events and things, this might not be cool anymore, or this might have changed? Or because often the consensus on what's good and what isn't on something like the Frank Tully's piece is like pretty much like a classic, and everyone that talks about it is like, yeah, cool. But then there's other things that it's like, oh, at one point we thought this was the shit, and then now it's like, I don't know, like, and you can still recognize its place in the history, but you start to kind of realize like, oh yeah, we learned from that. We learned what we were doing wrong. So how do you guys kind of balance that and keep your finger on what's happening currently? Is it just you guys being out and doing stuff, or?
Yeah, I think I'll try like my best to be aware and stuff, but I think also it's recognizing limitations and being honest about what my areas of interest are and what I'm focusing on, and that will mean that I don't focus on other things if I'm choosing one thing. So I think it's a good deal of that, and again, it's sort of just making sure that there's plenty of connections so that students will always then discover certain things, and also allowing them to tell us, inform us all the time that you're learning certain things. And I remember my little godson, he's about, I think he's 13 now, but when, you know, I was asking him for all the names of the Fortnite dances a few years ago, because like, you know, that's that they have loads of knowledge, and what they're interested in is totally different to what I was interested in.
Yeah, and I guess if you're encouraging them to go out into the scene, it's like, well, tell us what you found out while you were there.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I suppose that the help. So there are moments where we get students to bring their work, and then we talk about it.
Nice.
So, or if they prior to class, if they're organised, if they send something in, or you know, on the spot, give me an artist or whatever. Let's talk about it. Let's analyse it, so that they can see that there's access points for them to really engage. And through that, you know, they're going to feel a sense of ownership within the program as well. For sure. And that's really important, to feel like your lecturers are actually interested in what you do and what you're saying. Because a lot, I think, in the first year, and we see it throughout the program, there's always this self-editing, and I do it a lot, but it's getting students to understand that what they're saying, even if it's not right for them the first time, you're just getting them to talk a little bit more and making those connections and making them hear their own voice.
Honestly, I think like one of the biggest things that's helped me to learn over the years is just being opinionated, and it's also got me in a lot of arguments. But it's like me, and it's been okay, and I haven't gotten any too bad arguments because I'm very self-aware about my opinionatedness, if that's a word. But it's like, I think what's really important is to go, hey, I think this is shit.
And
like,
why?
Yeah, but then you also have to be open to the person, especially if it's like your lecturer or someone more experienced than you, to be like, well, here's why most people think it's not, you know? And then you can go, oh, now that I know that, I think it's really good. But if you don't, or the opposite of like, everyone hates this, but I love it. And it's like, well, why do you love it? Oh, well, I love this. And it's like, well, that's actually really like deep in, you know, you've really looked into that, and you really are employing the knowledge that we've taught you. And I think like, if I'm talking to someone about, you know, I don't know, someone on TikTok or like certain choreographers and stuff that I don't like, I might be like, well, I disagree and I hate it, but you've really thought through why you like it. So that's sick. Like, and you're learning a lot. And I think this idea of just throwing out opinions and having a non-judgmental space where it can be like, I disagree with you, but let's talk about why we disagree. It encourages so much learning because it forces you to delve into your own opinions. And I've done this so much where I start a conversation with one point of view, and through talking, I'm like, yeah, I was wrong. It's not shit. You know, it's actually pretty good.
And that's the art of conversation, right? Yeah. And I think a lot of people, including myself, to a point, that, you know, someone with a differing opinion doesn't mean they don't like you. It's not personal.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
And I think at certain age points, and you know, this is an overgeneralization, but when you're younger, it's harder to believe that.
Yeah.
So it's getting them to understand that in the space, to have a conversation, a discussion, isn't to pit each other against each other. It's to just open minds.
Yeah. And you get some sort of comfort from being around people that feel the same thing as you. So if you're the only one in a room that doesn't like a piece that you're watching, like, you feel like, oh, there's a pressure to fit in almost, when it's like, it's fine to just, like, you're not you're not part of the group because you don't agree with their opinions. You know, it's like you can all be still learning together. That's the group you're a part of.
Yeah. And that's what I love about academia, in the sense that, you know, without that, and I think when I was doing my first degree, I wasn't fully engaged in that idea of it because it wasn't as inclusive or engaging as it is, as we make it in, because of the way that we've learned in the past. We're understanding that. But it's not until later on that I'm just like, wow, this is the joy of academia, in the sense of, you know, talking things through. Me saying to Joe and Robert, right, I've got an idea. Can I just say it to you? And just be like, right, what do you guys think? And being open, knowing that they're not malicious. That they're not going to say something and then 2 seconds later say something behind my back, but know that also their reasoning, the educated reasoning behind it is elevating the way that we're thinking. I
have to say, like, I came in 2 or 3 times maybe for the final project, so it was, I guess they were showing half finished third year pieces,
like
right?
Lab.
And it was kind of like, I came in a couple of times and it was us 3, I think. Did anyone else come? No, it was just us 3, I think. And the idea was that to be like a panel and give feedback on during their pieces.
And we were using Liz Lerman, the feedback model.
And then there was also the other students who were doing their thing that they gave feedback as well as us. The thing I was really impressed by, I have to say, is like how well the conversations went. And it was very like, people were giving feedback that I was like, oh, damn, that's like, I'm like, I didn't even think of that. Or pushing back on each other's ideas in a really healthy way, which was great. Like, you often don't see that in I guess like young students as much. And I was really impressed. It's like someone who would like make a really like intelligent and deep point, and it was really like well put together, and I would be like, that is true. And then I'm sitting there like, wow, like that's, and then someone else from the other side is like, no, I don't agree, and here's why. And I'm like, oh, okay, oh, that was a good point too. And I'm like, I don't even know where I stand anymore. And then I have to give feedback, and I'm like, well, you're both right, but here's what would I think. But no, it was really nice. It was really nice atmosphere seeing that, and like also the students taking on the feedback was really nice. And I think that's a credit to you guys as well. Like, it's maybe even harder than just an idea about someone else's piece to take criticism about your own piece and like, or your own dance or way of movement. Because a lot of times, especially before you get into the industry where you have to start thinking of your dance as a product, before that, it's very intrinsically linked to who you are. And it's like, you're putting these deep ideas out on stage for someone to go, don't like the way you did it, you know? And to be able to take that and understand why, and understand not only the parts where you're like, nah, you're right, I can improve on that, I didn't do it well enough, but also to push back on them and be like, that's fair enough that you didn't like it, but I like it, so I'm going to keep it, you know, like, and that's a really mature skill that I saw them kind of employing already. So I was like, oh, that's, I just wanted to say that. I really enjoyed that aspect of how they interacted.
And it also keeps us in check. Like in the fact of going, right, well, why don't I like this? Is that, you know, am I working in the interest of the student getting a good grade? Is this more about my kind of own, you know, niggles about the industry or whatever? And it just, I think also framing it in the Liz Lerman model is really helpful, because, you know, asking, can I give you an opinion? Because I've done so many shows and you come out and someone's just like splurted feedback at you, like, whoa.
And in the way of saying like that it's not an opinion, like, oh, it was too long, or it was too boring, or like, it's like, no, but your opinion was that you found it too long, or your opinion was that you got bored. And it's like, an audience member is also like a person, you know, it's not just a fact that this was too long. It's like your experiences led you to believe it was too long or whatever.
So hopefully, you know, having that experience gets them to feel, because they're the dancer and they're the choreographer throughout the whole 3 years. So getting them to experience what it feels like in a bit more of a controlled environment, to be a bit more empathetic with people.
Also it's like they're the people that they spend 3 years with, and then they're going to have to step out into the industry and get it from random people that they've never met, or people that they respect, which is sometimes harder than a random person, when it's like you put your heart and soul into something and someone who inspired you and they're like, no, I don't really like your latest piece, and you're like and it's like that's tough enough to deal with
Yeah.
afterwards. But I think it's nice to have those 3 years where you have people that you have an ongoing relationship with, and you have an interest in each other succeeding, and you have tutors that you trust and
You
stuff
could
like
say
that.
to someone who says that to you, wow, that's really shocking. It'd be great to have a conversation about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And just steer it so that it just doesn't, it not falls off your shoulders, but at the same time, you can have some control in the way that you receive it.
Yeah, and I think that's another big skill as well with feedback, is like, you can't adjust your course based on everyone's opinion. I watch people do it over and over, and it stresses me out so much, where it's like, one person says that whatever the artistic work is, it doesn't even have to be dance, but it's like somebody does something and they're like, oh, it should be like this. Then they start to make it like that. And then when it goes that way, someone goes, oh no, I preferred it like this. And they go, okay, cool, I'll change it. As if there's one right answer and they keep getting it wrong, as opposed to like just making something and sticking with it. And which, funnily enough, this is what I'm trying to do with the podcast, is like, I've had so much feedback on it, which is really beautiful. And I love that people are engaged and they want to tell me their opinions, but it's a lot of like, oh, it's too long. Or, oh, I wish you did it like this. Oh, why don't you do this? Why don't you do the Zoom podcast? Why don't you make it shorter? Why don't you put, and it's like, that's fine. And I am balancing, I don't want to be stubborn. So I'm like, okay, what is the right answers here that for me? But also there's an element of like, well, this is how I'm doing it. And if you think it's too long, you just don't like listening to a long podcast. That's fine. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, just because you, and then I ask people, they're like, oh, it's too long. And I'm like, well, do you listen to, they're like, no, I don't really listen to podcasts. So I'm like, so you don't
Obviously,
like I listen to like Joe Rogan and like 3-hour podcasts. So that's something that I know there's an audience for. And also it's on me to realize like, oh, okay, well, my audience is 0 now, so I have to change some shit. But if it's working and there's people that are listening, it's about like you staying strong to yourself. And like going back to the dance and the choreography thing, it's like one person can come up and be like, oh, I hated that performance, but there's 300 people in the audience. Like, if the rest of them liked it, or your majority, or even if it's just like, okay, everyone hated it, maybe I'm in the wrong space. Maybe this needs to be here. Maybe the demographic that I'm pitching to is wrong. Maybe there's something that I can change a little bit. But yeah, just changing every time someone gives you bad feedback is like never a way to create anything good.
And it's also going to like fixed versus growth mindset.
Exactly.
Which is what we talk about a lot with the students, especially in the third year.
Yeah.
So in regards to you talking about the feedback session for final project, just getting them to think about like, this might have been my fixed mindset when I first started university, or listening to your podcast, but actually what's the growth mindset? Well, I like these elements. I'm not so keen on these elements, but yeah.
And it's developing like the self-awareness as well of like, why am I doing this? What is the thing I want to get across, and how do I want to get it across? Because it's like saying your choreography, I've had this, where it's like, you might be doing choreography and they're like, oh, well, it's very like basic and like this. And it's like, well, yeah, my point of what I wanted to get across was I wanted it to be basic. And it's like, well, then I'm wrong to tell you it's too basic, because it's like too basic depending on what. It's like depending on my eye or whatever. So if you start from the point of like, who am I? What message do I want to get across? How do I want to get this message across? And then you take the advice and fit it into that plan, It's like just putting any fuel in your car. Your car's going to blow up. It's like you keep going past petrol stations until you find the one that does the fuel for your car. And then that's where you're going to go the furthest.
And I suppose the inquisitiveness of people is also checking the way that we're asking questions.
Yes, that's true as well.
So in the sense of, why do you like long podcasts would be a more appropriate way of asking, because then you're getting you're getting information. And then, and being open to be swayed.
Yeah.
Well.
And I've got a friend that does it to me all the time. He's like, oh, why do you do this? And I'm like, I've never thought about it before. Maybe I should stop doing that. But it's like when he asked me, also he asked me, why do you do this? And I have a full read, and I'm like, no, that's why. And he's like, oh, fair enough. Rather than saying, I don't like that you do that, or whatever,
Yeah, because they're loaded questions.
Yes.
You've got an intention.
Yeah.
Before you've even started, you're wanting to make your point known.
Yeah.
Without being overly direct.
Yeah. I think it's like, this is something I talk about a lot, but like the communication and conversation is a skill. And with all this, like, I'm not one that like hates social media. I actually quite love it and stuff, but it's because it's so it's integral to our day, is like going on social media, writing and talking to people and stuff. Whereas I guess back in the day when you had to write a letter, it's like it's a separate activity. So you know, oh, my handwriting isn't very good, my vocabulary isn't very good. Now it's just part of our day.
Yeah.
So we forget that communication and conversation is a skill, and you can be bad at it. Like, and you're wandering around, and you're annoying people, and you're getting bad feedback. You know, oh, I don't understand why. It's like you are not good at communicating. Like you never develop that skill. You're just saying shit that's in your head and not putting it across, and then you're missing each other's point or whatever. But yeah, so I think that's like something that's like even more so, I would say, than the technical skill of dance is like understanding how to navigate all the other bits that facilitate the creation of dance and the improvement.
And I think some of those things stay the same.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
though everything's
Exactly.
So I think some of the things like learning group work, initiative, like these kinds of being independent, being resilient, confidence, depending on students.
You can apply that to anything, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So those things are always at the forefront.
And we always talk about transferable skills, how they learn many transferable skills throughout the program.
Yeah.
And how it's not just going to set them up for the dance industry. It's going to be many different sectors.
Yeah. Especially with even outside of the arts, but especially within, it's like there's so many people that like, I don't know, like I always see like dancers that, because I do photography, so there are a lot of dancers that will either, I'll want them to, I'm like, oh, just take a picture of me, like, or something, or take a picture of this, or with their phone or something, and they're like, oh, but I'm not really a photographer. I'm like, yeah, but you're such a good visual artist. Anything, like, you're going to be able to do, like, yes, there's some skill that I've researched and learned over the years of how to operate cameras and how to get the best out of them. Yeah. But your visual eye is already trained. Like, you know what looks good, And like, I've got a friend that's, he does painting, and it's like, he's great at, making video content because he understands lighting, he understands framing. It's all the same stuff. So it's like, yeah, kind of transferable skills. Whatever you learn, you're going to be able to apply to other stuff. And it's not like, it's definitely not starting from zero again,
And I think it's also, I guess it's being mindful of opening, like, I know we've spoken a lot about being inquisitive and opening their minds. It's always interesting, we're talking about social media, and there are discussions going around about cancel culture at the moment, and to a certain extent, and it's like there's always the dichotomy of like you're in a safe space to explore and to learn and to fail, and not be judged to a certain extent. And I think the students, I would hope that the students understand that by the third year, and to take that out when they graduate.
No, I agree.
This idea of perfection. I mean, we talk about it all the time. I mean, it's so detrimental.
Yeah.
And it's hard when you're working to something that gets a grade.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be your classification of a degree.
Yeah. But even this, like, they could fail the degree program and still learn loads. Do you know what I mean? It's not only the grade, like, yes, in a kind of the main objective for going to university is to pass the course and do well. Yes. But it doesn't mean that you've, like, let's say you completely fail the course, but you finish it. It doesn't mean you walk out there with nothing. No. You've still got 3 years of experience, connections, knowledge. It's like, no matter what, even if your grades aren't going well or whatever, you're still learning and you're still gaining a lot of valuable stuff. So in that way, you're not failing. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think that's why we really push the process.
Yeah.
In anything that we set, it's the process of being and doing and interacting that really, the engagement of that process gives most learning.
And if only the rest of the education system was like that. I think we do have to wrap up. I don't want to get kicked out or for them to cut off the equipment. I realize that's what they do here, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Is when you go too much overtime, they just turn everything off. So we learned that lesson on Saskia's podcast.
Oh yeah, that was an abrupt end.
Yeah, it was an abrupt end because just after the camera cut off, you'll see. I didn't put I was going to put it to be funny, but basically they just shut everything off on us half mid conversation, and we were like, "Oh dear!" And you just see both of our faces in the camera, like, "What's happening?"
They've got cameras here.
No, on the no, because I think they time it like by the end of your booking, they give you a grace period to get out, and then you're done. Well, so let's not let that happen. No, honestly, I super appreciate you guys coming. I'm glad we can like make it where all three of you can be here. And I super appreciate also, if I haven't said this, like all the support you've given me in the last couple of years, I guess, which started with Rob. So yeah, super appreciate that. Super appreciate what you guys are doing for the community, and you guys have produced a lot of great dancers and great artists, and also facilitated external artists to come in and like work with you guys and stuff. So that's wonderful. And I think most people would agree that you're a brilliant force for good in the community,
Thank you.
which is why I kind of wanted to talk with you guys. Oh no,
Yeah,
it wouldn't be complete without you
when
guys.
Joe said it, was like, why does he want to talk to us?
No, for me, it's like it's anything. Yeah, it's super interesting. It's like it's an obvious one that I wanted to do at some point.
As you know, I'm a big fan of the podcast. But this might be the first episode that I can't wait to listen to.
You won't like listening to yourself.
No.
It feels weird hearing ourselves here.
Yeah. All right, guys. So like I said at the beginning, I don't know what's going to happen with the lockdown yet. If we have a break from the podcast, please stay with me. I will be back at some point. We're never going to give up on it completely. We're just going to figure out the next way that we can make it happen. Like I said, I don't want to do Zoom, which I could, but I think I love, sitting down with people and talking face to face. It's a whole different dynamic. And yeah, I want to make that happen, and also, find the best way to make that happen for me, so I'm not killing myself to do the same thing every week when it's not working. So yes, if we do have a break, which is very possible because of the lockdown, it's not that the podcast is finished. It's just a break until I can figure out the next way to make it happen. Thanks for everyone for listening. Hope you're enjoying your lockdown. Hope you're not feeling too shit. And if this has even helped give you something to do for a little bit, then I'm super happy. And yeah, I'll catch everybody soon. Subscribe to the YouTube, and give me likes and comments and all that stuff that makes me feel good. Thanks again, guys, for coming. And see you later, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.